Hey everybody, welcome to the Dawn of Drones podcast. We are week 2 into our Movers and Shakers month, sponsored by ParaZero and Delta Drone International. So thanks guys for that. And today's episode is sponsored by 2 amazing companies that have just recently partnered. We've got True Weathered Solutions with Don Berchoff, the CEO, and Drone Industry Systems Corporation with Mike DiCosola. By the way, everybody, we are in Las Vegas, and you can see the weird backgrounds because we're all in our own hotel rooms right now. It's a long story why that is, but hopefully the internet will remain good here at the Mirage. We're here at Commercial UAV Americas in fabulous Las Vegas, so pretty cool to be here together, although in our separate rooms. We are live, so I just wanted to remind you guys to drop some positive encouragement in the chat, ask your questions, make your comments. We absolutely love to hear from you. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to start with, I'll call him Mikey D. So Mike and I go way back, and he's from Chicago. He's got an amazing company. So Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and Drone Industry Systems Corp.
Sure. So I started off in construction about 10 years ago. And so the industry itself looked pretty grim in terms of where it was going next. And I knew that the drone business was starting to look like it was going from government to commercial, but there was no infrastructure established. So I started doing a lot of R&D into the autonomous side of things over the last 7 years. And when I was able to combine the two, I realized that we can actually create an autonomy on a system that you can build right off of rooftops and grounds. So that's the smart rooftop and ground airport system. Using the general contracting, the autonomous research, that's what led us to these IPs we filed.
Well, so Mike is talking about IPs, and I've been working with him for a while. When he says IPs, I mean he's got so many different word marks, trademarks, intellectual property, patents, and patents pending out there. It's incredible. But Mike, you used the buzzword of the day, the coin of the realm, which is infrastructure, right? So we're seeing hopefully, next week or within the next 2 weeks, September 27th, the infrastructure bill coming through, hopefully some big money rolling down, some of that rolling to the drone community. And I know you've created this vertiport in a box IP solution. So let's maybe get that slide up, and then why don't you walk us through what exactly this infrastructure system is?
Sure. So the vertiport in a box system is an infrastructure for autonomy when it comes to drone delivery. And it relates not just to actual drones, but also VTOLs and UGVs, so unmanned ground vehicles. It's an ecosystem. And so what we looked at doing is saying, okay, how do we integrate the current market where we have stakeholders who are competitive in their field, but still need to be part of the backbone? And how do we encourage that backbone to participate where everybody becomes a part of it? Well, the smart rooftop and ground airport allows us to be built on a backbone system that's node centric. So everything to us is considered a node. So it doesn't matter if it's a drone, a vehicle, those to us are nodes. And that node centric system bringing in blockchain, and blockchain memorialize so we're creating the backbone for the actual infrastructure.
Yeah. So we're having a little bit of glitchy here, probably because we're on the Mirage's like free Wi-Fi in our hotel rooms. But look, we've got your picture up right now. This vertiport in a box system. Just to repeat some of what Mike said, it's node centric, and for those that track the military and national security arena, the buzzwords they're using is modular open systems approach. And that's exactly what Mike has actually created here, not just for drones, but as he said, for advanced air mobility. And speaking of nodes and this idea of partnerships and plug and play, this is a great segue to get Don into the conversation, because you've recently, Mike, partnered with Don to bring weather to your Vertiport in a box solution. And so let's talk to Don here for a second. Don, first of all, so great to have you. Go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about True Weather Solutions.
Well, thanks, Dawn. True Weather Solutions, I started this in 2015. As you know, I have about 35 years in the weather business, 24 years in the Air Force, conducting real-world operations, integrating weather into real-world operations. Really, the Air Force does a really good job, so does the Navy, of really knowing how to use weather data to maximize mission effectiveness. And during those 24 years, I've honed that craft. About 40% of all missions that could fly and are grounded due to weather, they could fly, 40% that are grounded. So we're working at True Weather is we built an analytics platform, a data fusion platform, and using our knowledge, taking the best of all kinds of weather data sources, fusing them together and turning around a very simple decision insight for a specific application and a specific time to get back that 40% as much as we can. So on the data side, we know that we also need to close the gaps, right? There's a data desert below 5,000 feet, and satellites can't penetrate the atmosphere. And so the models you get today or you're using on your apps, they're very limited by initial weather. We have errors going into that before we even start. We're trying to get those data gaps closed in True Weather using micro weather sensors and IoT data sets. And part of this is working with Mike, because he's going to have these nodes that will be collecting data. And the goal is to crowdsource this data, bring it into our system, and then gradually and over time increase the density and get better weather predictions that are going to reduce the uncertainty so pilots can fly more safely.
Yeah, so by the way, everybody, if you're not on Clubhouse, you need to be, and you need to join my Drone Law Connections room, because last week these guys were on there, and you really missed a great one. We'll talk more about who be on tomorrow, actually, but you guys, for the first time, I heard last week as we were talking in Clubhouse about your kind of unique, let's just say your unique offer to municipalities. I mean, you could just kind of alluded to it, Don, this idea of the more sensors, the more information you can quote unquote crowdsource and get to Mike's system. How is that going to work with municipalities? I'm going to let either one of you take this. Maybe Mike would be the better guy, at least initially. How are you kind of incentivizing, the state, local, tribal, territorial governments to work with you guys to get this data and to use these systems?
So one of the IPs we did is the Weather Data Exchange, and the Weather Data Exchange is going to allow third-party stakeholders to participate. So sensor manufacturers will be able to sit there and say, put my sensor there so I can get a ticket into this cost. How do we subsidize the cost? How do we reduce the cost? And so government agencies will be in the same situation. They'll be able to either subsidize or monetize completely what their costs are by capturing that data and bringing it into our blockchain system. So that blockchain system will actually show the chain of custody of where the data came from, where it is, and where it's going. And also important for cybersecurity and AI/ML. So you'll be able to take that information, and that's where Don comes in, because Don will take that information and be able to model it. And Don will answer that one better.
Well, Don, before we get to you, I want to back up for a second. So Mike, I think most people probably know, but if not, I'm very sensitive, having been military like Don, on acronyms. So AI/ML, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Yours is a smart system, and I do want to get a lot more deeply into that. You also used the term, blockchain, which I think might have got blipped out a little bit earlier. The things you're talking about, Mike, I mean, I just posted up on LinkedIn this morning. OMB and the DHS, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, just put out for public comment this idea of zero trust, which means, don't trust anything coming or going. And you've kind of created you've anticipated this, you've been tracking the federal policies, you built this into your system. And I think you are light years ahead of where other people are on this, quite frankly. So good on you. Let me ask Don then. So explain then this weather aspect, Don, and these sensors, what's your vision? How will you then model it to help municipalities or state, local, tribal, territorial governments?
Well, first, just to jump on the cyber issue. So, I'm military. I was National Weather Service Science and Technology Director for 4 years. I had all the responsibility of signing off on all the security on all the systems. I know all the vulnerabilities in the weather systems. I also understand that the FAA in weather is the most regulated vertical in weather. So we have to meet standards. I'm actually leading the ASTM F-38 weather standards with a really distinguished group of folks to try to modify some of the rules in the FAA to help us use IoT data sets to help close these gaps so that we can get better forecasts for drones. If we don't do that, we're going to hurt the drone industry. We need this data. But the challenge is making sure that the data is secure. So as a military guy, I've always had in my mind that we have to have reliability, integrity of data, and we have to set up a system that is going to guarantee that our data, any data that comes to my system, we'll just say, is going to be cyber secure and have all the appropriate safety precautions in there. And frankly, a lot of weather companies don't do that, right? So this is a bar and we got to cross it. Now, so that's important for the state and local governments to recognize that anything you get from True Weather is going to meet all those regulations. We're going to have the blockchain backing of Mike's system. And then once we get this data and start collecting it, we're going to make it available on the Weather Exchange for people to purchase and for us to use. And once you purchase something from the data exchange, it's going to be guaranteed that it's secure, right? Now, we're going to take that data and we're going to use it to determine a goodness level of that data. In other words, all data is not equal, right? But all data is good if you know how to use it, if you know where you got it, and you know the security of it. And the goodness is important because there's going to be different risk elements to missions in the drone operations, right? Some are going to be flown over, desert areas with, few people and low ground risk. Some are going to be flown over cities with more ground risk. So what we're trying to do with the ASTM F-38 group, and I have to call out my colleagues, Ralph Stoffler and Robbie Hood and others, we're working on this. This is a really hard problem. We're going to try to develop a tiered system of data goodness for weather data, and then apply a standard to each one of those, and then make that available through the marketplace so people know how good the data is and what missions it could be used for. And there'll be we'll have to write some standards and regulations around that. But the bottom line is that True Weather will be building the software to determine the goodness of the data using different techniques that we've used in the weather business for 40 years, as well as some other techniques to say, this is a level 1 data set, this is a level 2 data set, this is a level 3 data set, and then make that available. The market will drive the price of that. And all the people who purchase sensors, whether it's the state and local governments, they'll be able to put their data on the market and know it's cyber secure and get that data out and receive revenue for it. But there'll also be increases in the value of their industry within their area because they're going to have the best weather data possible, which is going to reduce that uncertainty, increase ROI for drone operators, and increase safety, which is really important because community acceptance of drones, one of the things is going to be how much weather do you have in your area? How dangerous is that weather? We're going to want to nail that so that we don't have unnecessary incidences which lead to reduction in private sector, in the community acceptance of this, right? Plus the liability on public safety, who fly these, on people who fly them. Because beyond visual line of sight is a whole different game. The pilots are blind. Anyone who thinks that we know what's going on 5 miles out, they're lying to themselves because there's no pilot on that aircraft. In the past, the FAA said, you have to have knowledge of the weather you're flying in. Well, that's easy when you're on the aircraft. It's not at all possible today to scale this industry because you can't have pilots looking at their video feed, seeing what the weather is. If you want to automate everything, we're going to have to set up systems for that data to come in. It's going to have to be much more higher resolution. We got to know where the IMC is. We got to know where those winds are blowing stronger aloft around buildings. And this system is going to be the whole framework for really setting this industry for a launch on the weather side.
And Don, you just used an acronym too, just to be clear, IMC.
Okay.
I know it's meteorological conditions. What's the I again?
Yeah, the I is it's instrument
Instrument
rules.
meteorological. Okay, again,
So you're
like
not
there's
supposed to
no.
fly today. Let me just say, Dawn, so if today, part 107, you have to be 500 feet from a cloud deck, right? You have to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
VMC or VFR, right? Visual instrument, visual rules. IMC means you're on instruments. And so, but you're not supposed to do that today if you're flying on the Part 107. Most drones are not permitted today unless you're military or you have special dispensation to do it. You're not supposed to fly in clouds or fog. And this is an important problem because the reason that rule is in place is that FAA wants to give operators coming out of clouds like helicopters and stuff time to see a drone if it's in their way.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're violating those rules, you're increasing your liability risk, because if you hit that aircraft, you're gonna have a bad day.
Yeah, we're going to talk about bad days here in a minute, but before we do, Don, I want to just do we're talking about safety. I mean, at the heart of everything both you and Mike are doing together, you're creating an incredibly safe and cyber secure system together, right? On the note of safety, I do want to take a second to talk about a company that's doing amazing things in safety, of course, Parazero. They develop and provide state-of-the-art drone safety solutions that fuel the industry, and Delta Drone is the parent company, Delta Drone International. They're doing incredible services across the globe. So thanks for that. And but on that note, let's talk brass tacks for a second, and then I want to head back to Mike. Okay. So Don, as a practical matter, okay, let's talk practicalities. You're talking about sensors. My understanding, just from previous conversations I've had with you, is right now you have partnerships with about 6 different sensor companies that are helping you compile this data. How, as a practical matter, would state, local, tribal, territorial, municipal, whatever governments employ sensors in their locale to feed into this weather exchange IP that Mike just mentioned, and then for you to model it? So how do they do that? Do they work with you, you give some recommendations, they place them where, on rooftops? I mean, what are we talking about here exactly? Because we are talking at the heart of this about infrastructure. And by the way, like I said, no better time to be talking about this than now, because as this money rolls down, everybody, and the Fed side, get your Form 9s together, right? Get your contracts ready to let, because when that money drops, you got to be ready to go, and you need to be talking to these guys. So what did he need to be doing there in those governments for the sensor farm that you're talking about at the local level?
Well, first of all, you need to have a professional meteorologist in this engaged, because putting a sensor somewhere, is very critical of knowing where to put it, where you get the maximum effect of that cost you're spending on the single, understanding the ConOps of where you're flying, maximizing, the quality of the sensor. And there is an optimized strategy to putting sensors out, because there's different types of sensors, right? So when I come in, if you ask me to come in, like we're doing right now, we're working a little in Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, Texas. We got a NASA SBIR for building an urban weather infrastructure test bed. So we understand the sensing thing. That's what I did in NOAA. I actually did the optimization for the whole sensor network for the whole country. There's a lot of gaps in there. And what we want to do is we have to have a mix of different types of sensors, some air-based, some ground-based, some remote sensors, some are in situ where you put them, you want to just collect data for a specific point. So the whole idea is to optimize that. So that's what True Weather does. We can come in, we can work with the municipalities or the states and say, what are you trying to accomplish in your mission? And we'll tell you best how to lay out a sensing strategy and the types of sensors that will fill that gap at maximum benefit. And then what we do is we work with you to do it cost effectively, because nobody has money, right? And so I'm the cheapest guy in the world, all right? I will help you find the best and cheapest sensing solution that's going to meet the price. We've done this already with one OEM. They've tied in some of the sensors from one of our partners. Once you buy a sensor, we just need the IP address. You don't have to do anything else. The data will come into TrueFlight after it goes through Mike's blockchain. It'll come into TrueFlight and it'll be appearing in your API back to you automatically with all the other data, or it'll be on our workbook. So it's a plug and play concept. And then what'll happen is over time, we'll get fed in models that will allow us to assess and evaluate how good the data is and get it on the market, right, at a fair price so you can get revenue.
Yeah.
State
So,
assembly,
yeah. So again, I think,
and they
God,
went to the state assembly and they said, look, we're going to recover the cost of these sensors. If you buy the first tranche of them, we'll get them out there, we'll resell the data, and then from there you'll be able to buy more sensors. It becomes a self-fulfilling ice cream cone, self-licking ice cream cone, where you're getting revenue, you buy more sensors, you get revenue. As long as you're working with us, we can help you optimize that.
no, I love that. I mean, it's almost like, I have a Tesla and I've got solar panels and charging station. And, when I generate electricity, I don't use it always to charge my Tesla, right? That leftover, whatever we don't use in my house or for my car is going back to the grid. And I technically make money off of that, right? So I know I relate to what you're saying because this is a really brilliant model that you guys have come up with. But speaking of nodes, I want to go back to Mike and kind of really flesh out this reporter in a box because it's more than the weather IP exchange. That's a critical part of it. Okay. But for people to really understand the scope and scale of what we're talking about, Mike, give us an example, and maybe let's pop that picture up again because a picture does paint 1,000 words. And I know this is based on like an example of a strip mall. If you've got a strip mall, let's just say, Mike, 10,000 foot square roof, several different, retail outlets in there. First of all, we're talking about drone delivery. Let's just focus on drones and not eVTOLs at this time. How many drones can you put on the roof? What else is up there, right? Charging stations or what else? What's on the ground? What's your vision of what you see here in this kind of strip mall as one example of how your system can be deployed, generating weather data the entire time? Walk us through this.
Sure. So the eco itself is designed so that way every node is a machine. So those machines could be identified as any of the participating partners. So let's use an example. You have the landing pads, the charging stations. You have different types of drone manufacturers. So all of these manufacturers we're going to be onboarding to make sure that there's a cleanliness to bringing in their APIs, their SDKs into the backbone system. Once we identify them as a node into this node-centric system, it doesn't matter anymore to us what the hardware is, so long as it enhances the safety of the actual infrastructure. So for us, and it has to support it, of course. So for us, using an example of a strip mall like you're showing, that strip mall is a 14-foot high with a 3-foot parapet wall that's hiding, the eyesores of everything behind it. And it's also a protection, so it has that curb appeal still there for the actual investor of the property. But the buy-in becomes this vacant floor plan that's now on a roof that was once worthless real estate. And now we're turning it into a value because that footprint can be identified no different than the vanilla boxes of those. Let's use this example. Let's say 5 vanilla units that you might have different types of businesses in. You might have a 7-Eleven in there, convenience store of some kind. You might have a fast food restaurant. And, those are the different items of products that can be used for using the drone delivery example in that ecosystem. So on that rooftop, you now can say, let's say using those 5 units, you might have 2 dedicated drones for delivery up there waiting to be deployed autonomously at the time that the mobile app calls it in. At the same time, it needs to know, those algorithms will say, hey, this drone has this available energy to make this flight. And this is where the weather kicks in at that point, where it's, hey, this is not conducive for flight because the IMC's not available. And so what you can do with that footprint is you can actually turn around and say, okay, well, this actual footprint, even though it's a 15,000 square foot mall, it has 10,000 square feet of available footprint. Let's go ahead and put one for a defibrillator drone, one for a municipality. It could be, a law enforcement, first responder. So you can make these little almost parking spaces that have these charging stations available to where they can be deployed and dedicated to whatever it may be. You can even turn around and say, well, just like airports right now, for example, they might have dedicated helicopter ports just sitting there for the media. Well, you can easily say, well, we're going to put the media here. There's 5 different media spots for each of these. And now you can have a regional, deployment for any kind of real-time media. So you can actually footprint this rooftop for everything necessary. And then the sensors come in. You're now going inland from the normal airports where that desert data now can actually go inland. And the more we actually add to these rooftops, the more that participate. Unlike normal transportation systems, those transportation systems get bogged down. Well, the more we put in, the safer it becomes. Because you can actually go back to home base. If you have a lost link, the more rooftops there are, the safer it becomes. The more sensors, you can now, what we call daisy chain the data. You could take the weather and daisy chain it from one to another and know waypoint A, B, and C and stay away from the bad weather swath and still not have to worry about grounding the drone. So this is a safer, more profitable means of doing things. And the buy-in with the weather data exchange is that it now has an incentivized view at this, where you can turn around and say, look, I can actually participate in these sensors through this distribution of this infrastructure, and I can actually monetize this into a cryptocurrency exchange, no different than like the options exchange. And that's what the weather data exchange is. So that's where that comes from.
Well, you
Dawn,
didn't say this word. Don, can I just say one thing, and then I'm going to go to you here. You didn't say this word, Mike, but I'm going to say it. This is completely customizable. In other words, this example you're showing us isn't the be all and end all. It's one thing, and you can work with not only a client at a strip mall or something similar to create a very specific infrastructure for their actual needs in their actual location. But then you can also, as you said, with the nodes, bring in all kinds of different partners in a very agnostic way. So that's where I think this is really interesting. Don, over to you. What were you going to add?
Well, I just want to say on the data, sometimes I think pilots, people are used to getting their weather for free. And so there's a concern when we talk about paying for data. I think what folks have to understand is that the government is not going to be able to, federal government's not going to be able to cover these data needs. I know this. I know the budgets. I know what the focus is. The only way we're going to really be able to improve the reliability and predictability of drone operations at scale, when everyone's on a schedule and you have a supply chain that is interconnected and logistics that are very complex, is you have to have the microdata. Otherwise, you can't afford to lose even minutes during this process because you're dropping money on the floor. And I think what we're trying to, the case, the argument here is that when you look at that shopping center, you need more than just ground-based observation. We need to know what's happening at 200, 300, 400, 500 feet. That shopping center can also put in a wind LiDAR that is, not cheap, but it's not expensive if you amortize the cost across all the users over time. It may cost pennies per flight to have this amazing weather capability that's going to save you thousands of dollars a week, just because you're optimizing your routes. We put those, we're going to need sensors that can also see aloft. The whole idea of the weather data exchange is that we're able to do that amortization of the cost. We're able to reach as many people as possible, pull in a lot of data, and really drive the costs down for the end user while people are making money that own the sensors. I mean, it's just really something that is so out of our ability to think about because people have just been so used to free weather data. But they have to understand free comes with a big price. And some people right now are starting to see that, and that's why they're coming to us.
Well, Don, you and I talked early on, even before we met in person at AUVSI for the first time, and we're on that managing weather for public safety operations panel together with Matt Rowland from the Fort Wayne, Indiana PD. And, you two things. Number one, if you guys haven't read my article about Don and Inside Unmanned Systems magazine in the AUVSI preview edition that's online right now, it's also on my website, P3 Tech Consulting. Check it out. It's a great interview. That's the first time I really engaged with Don, and you said something earlier. I'm going to repeat it. You said, you can really have a bad day, with weather, and So true. And I know that's what you're trying to avoid. And I remember Matt explaining to the crowd there at AUVSI how he and his partner were out in the woods one day, flying their drone, because Matt's in charge of their UAS program there at Fort Wayne. And all of a sudden it wasn't operating properly, and it was, just acting wonky. So they brought it back here. There's ice all over the blades, and they didn't see it coming at all. So give us a second. Just tell us about that. This idea that the criticality of weather, like maybe this is just a flashing, blind flashingly obvious, but I don't know that it is when you have experts like Matt and other people out there, that are oftentimes surprised. And, weather can surprise you even if you are even a weather expert, right? But
Right.
Tell us about the criticality of weather and why it is you partnered then with Mike to bring this to people.
Well, first of all, I don't think you'd go to your family physician to conduct brain surgery on you, right? And so the family physician is the general weather providers out there today, all right? And I'm in this industry for a long time, and they're all my friends. But the bottom line is you can only do so much with the data we have. After a while, you can't machine learn your way out of a paper bag, because if you're not bringing new data in, all you're doing is recycling the same stuff and just trying a different technique. And we know the definition of insanity, right, is when you try to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. This is the problem we're in, because the data desert is not getting filled with data right now. So what we have to do is focus on the fact that, the drones have very different weather impacts than manned aviation. Their impacts are ubiquitous. We're not flying around well-instrumented airfields. It's absolutely, in this case, Mike, launched his drone. He was in fog, but he didn't know it was freezing, right? You don't know freezing fog because it's super cool water droplets. It's the invisible threats that are going to get people in trouble. It's winds around buildings that you don't know are there. It's, winds aloft that are blowing at 20 or 30 knots stronger at the surface that get your drone caught up in wind shear. It's the battery power optimization, that battery problem where you don't know the winds are stronger aloft and you're not going to get your drone back. We had an accident off of Wilmington Beach where they were flying VLOS over the water and they couldn't get their drone back, and it crashed their $30,000 drone in the water watching it go in. So,
Oh
the
my
bottom line is
God.
imagine BV loss. Imagine BV loss now. We're just going to increase this risk hundredfold. And the challenge is the liability. People aren't taking weather seriously. They think, oh, I'm a weather guy. I can look outside. I can see stuff, right? Well, you can't see anything if your drone is 10 miles away. And the bottom line is that even the public safety is starting to recognize that you have to have more professionalized weather training, weather processes and procedures, and better data in order to protect your pilots, right? Because if you have an accident and you get called into court and you said, oh, I looked at my weather app, they're going to say, what kind of professional approach is that to managing weather? You just hurt somebody, right? If you have all the documentation to show your training was done, that your processes were good, that you did the best you can to collect data. And by the way, like a drone in a box, you can get a $400 sensor to put with that. And I highly recommend that every drone in a box have a weather sensor, all right? Because this is going to drive down your liability risk immediately. But my point is if you have everything in order and you go into court, a guy like me comes in and says, you know what, they did everything they could. They just, this was just a bad weather day that just caught everybody by surprise. That's going to get you off the hook a lot easier than telling them that you used your weather app that doesn't really focus on the area or have the data quality that you need to fly.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned earlier, I'm going to go back to Mike here in a second. You mentioned earlier that during AUVSI, that a lot of these weather apps are just predictive, right? They're not like real time, like not what is that happening right now, but what we think might happen in the future. And that's a pretty significant difference. I mean, you're talking liability to a lawyer here. I completely get it. I agree 100% with what you're saying. So transitioning maybe back over to Mike, or maybe Don to bridge over to Mike. So why partner with Mike? Why partner with Drone Industry Systems Corp to marry up your weather sensor kind of concept and True Flight, which is your product, one of many, with Mike's Vertiport in a box system and the weather data IP exchange?
Well, because first of all, True Weather doesn't claim to be able to be a world expert at everything. And what my whole company's built around being an integrator with really outstanding weather expertise, understanding the science and technology and the operations. And we go out and find the best partners. I mean, all my Sensa partners are the best of the best. They've all been vetted. I don't suffer fools easily. I have a mission, right? My mission is to show what weather could do for your business and how you can get more flight time safely and protect your pilots. And so when I met Mike, he has a capability or that I saw as really critical to my ecosystem, and I said, I knew I had to have, we had to raise the bar on reliability, on standards, on cybersecurity. I knew we also had to have a way to get this data monetized so that we can incentivize people to buy sensors to fill the gaps. This was always in my vision 8 years ago. So Mike comes along one day and he's talking at AUVSI, and it's like my ears lit up, and I reached out to him and I said, Mike, I can help you and you can help me, right? And Mike's a great guy. We get along great, and it's all about trust, right? You got to trust the people you work with. And, I have a lot of confidence that they can execute all the things they're talking about. And I have a lot of confidence that if we could do this, we're going to we're really going to accelerate by probably 3 years what others are doing research on right now to have a very reliable, predictable data set that is secure and can be monetized and really accelerate closing these gaps. Because that's all I'm about. I have one mission, right? This is a means to an end, right? This is one of my 5 means to an end.
No, that's awesome. And Mike, I want to talk about your timeline here in a second. But before I do that, I also, I've been remiss a little bit. We had the picture up twice now, and we don't need to flip it back up. But, this is more about than just the rooftop, right? Because we're talking delivery and there's a receiving end, right? The customer. Tell us about, so we looked at really focused on the one part of your system, which is like the rooftop and maybe some ground where you can have robots, and this can all be connected, right, in a very networked and multimodal way. But what about the other components of your system that this weather will inform? Tell us about your mailbox delivery portion of this and any other pieces that I missed, so everybody walks away from here clearly understanding your entire system.
Sure. So from a delivery perspective, in terms of logistics, if you Don has explained that you're not the pilot on that drone. So if you're not physically there, how can you really have situational awareness? And so with the node-centric system, you can have what we call waypoint A, B, and C as an example. Waypoint A might be the actual departure drone sitting on a rooftop for that actual whatever payload distribution it's going to be doing. Then you have the actual en route, and the en route drone will actually be able to communicate what is currently going on with weather. Then from there you have the destination, which is the landing pad. The smart mailbox landing pad will be able to take that data, and it will be able to say, okay, well, we've got a daisy chain of information here. So what is that daisy chain of information here? That information is, this is not conducive for flight. We can actually depart, but we can't go en route because that drone that's currently flying is noticing there's an IMC weather that it's in. So it's communicating now through cloud, and it's saying, hey, I'm en route and I see, bad weather here. It can have any kind of sensor on it. It can have fog sensor, lightning sensor, and it's communicating that information. That information is now equally available throughout the node-centric system. So if you have a smart mailbox landing pad, it might now relocate that location and say, hey, we have a public landing pad that's a block away. We're not going to ground that drone, but we're going to go ahead and divert the location of that drone so that way we can actually get to you at a different waypoint. Is that acceptable? And so from there, you're now really saving a lot of money. And that's where the node-centric system comes into play, but it's also where the daisy chaining of data comes into play, because you're actually able to now node-centrically know, okay, where's what is real time? What are those drones really doing in flight? Hey, don't come down this way. I'm in a bad area. And that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, when I think about your system, Mike, I think of every single potential acronym that's out there, IoT, AIML, 5G, like you got everything. I mean, soup to nuts in this thing, and really you're building your own kind of UTM for a city, and really building a smart city that if in case it's not, just to make sure this is not lost on people, this can also connect, as Mike said earlier, to unmanned or uncrewed ground vehicles. I'm assuming at some point maritime, unmanned or uncrewed underwater vehicles, UUVs. I mean, Mike can do it all. I know that's also probably why you're part of the Advanced Mobility Collective, because that's, we had Todd Spain on here last month during our high impact use cases talking about firefighting and whatnot. But, that's his mission for healthcare and firefighting. So, what you guys are doing together, and Mike, your vertiport in a box system, it's incredible. By the way, everybody, if you haven't bought your tickets to Colorado Springs for next week, you should. The National Association of State Aviation Officials is having their annual conference there, and these two are going to be there at a booth. So check them out. And I know, Mike, you're going to be on a panel with me and folks like Yolanka Wolf from the Community Air Mobility Initiative and Rex Alexander from 5 Alpha. It's going to be a great panel talking about urban air mobility and how this system can work in that, with those kind of aircraft as well. So pretty spectacular. I asked it, but I'll repeat it. We only have a couple minutes left. So Mike, I'm going to ask you your timeline of when you see this actually launching in real world. And then what I want to do is give you each maybe, your 30-second elevator speech to close out before we do kind of closing comments and close out this episode. So Mike, what's your timeline? And then what's your 30-second elevator speech?
So timeline to launch would be second quarter of 2022. That's our guideline. And in terms of, the system itself, it's, and you alluded to me missing that part about it. It is an a la carte system. So it's open platform, it's agnostic, it's scalable. In terms of interoperability, you can bring in any kind of API SDK. The biggest mistake I think that we are all making is we're thinking that cybersecurity is going to be the last thing that's important, and let's get our drones out there, but it should be the very first thing in the onboarding process. So if you want to be part of that participation partnership, I would say reach out to me and reach out to Don, because we need to do an onboarding process, make sure that you're cyber clean and capable of bringing those APIs in and finding those vulnerabilities ahead of time. So that way you're using the time properly for when the launch is really there.
Oh, that's great advice. And so early and often, right, when you're talking about cybersecurity. Don, how about you? Your 30-second elevator speech.
Well, True Weather is now working with the Vertical Lift Society. I have a panel. Rex brought us in to do a panel on vertiports and weather. And so I think, I'm working with Veyron Vehicles, working with the Thomas Institute. Getting this planning of weather instrumentation into your design early is really important in smart cities, because it's a lot. We're budget dust in the beginning, but later, if you try to retrofit us into your system, it becomes a really difficult problem. So you want to plan your weather sensors early in your design of your greater smart city solution. And, we're working with NASA, like I said, on this urban infrastructure test bed. Not sure which city that's going to be in yet, but we're going to have 2 rotating wind lidars that go out 20 kilometers. We're going to have like an MRI of that area of the winds, and all these data sets are going to feed in here and just totally reduce the uncertainty and the chaos around weather. It's going to make your day a lot better. True Weather does have today APIs. We are selling them as a service. We have a workbook that we provide a 1-year subscription for folks to use. It's the best, I think, at bringing real world data together, not just model data, and it really helps in making decisions. And we are ready to go, and all we're doing now is plugging in new data sets to make it better and better. So if you come to True Weather today and get our APIs, in 2 weeks from now, you're going to have a better data set, because we're going to be adding new data on. And that means you have nothing to do except continually get improved weather services as this industry expands. And we'll continue to refine our products to make them even better for the end users, to help save money for flying, reduce cost, and increase safety. And your client's predictability, because It really stinks when you have to tell your client, I couldn't get your job done yesterday because I didn't look at the weather. And I probably could have had it done the day before, but I didn't get it done because I wasn't paying attention. So that's what we're here to do. We're not here to hurt the industry. We're here to help the industry. We could get 40% more flight time. And I proved that in the Air Force when I was in the Tank Airlift Control Center. We got a financial analyst showed that we cut weather delays. Under this framework we're producing here, we cut the delays for 100,000 missions a year. They were getting 5,000 weather delays a year. We cut them to 1,800 just by using the techniques we're using. We saved them $200 million, and it was validated because we were nominated for the Chief of Staff Team Excellence Award. So we know what we're doing. And the bottom line is we're just trying to use all this knowledge now to help the industry.
Well, and you know, you guys have both been talking about safety. First of all, thank you both for being here. I mean, this was absolutely spectacular. Really appreciate you guys also both sponsoring this particular episode and spending this time with us to tell us about what it is you're doing, your collaboration. I really think, you know, when we think about the theme of this month, which is movers and shakers, you guys fit the mold. You're breaking the mold, honestly, in what you're doing. So thank you for that, because I know what you're doing is going to move the industry forward. We talked a lot about safety, which is also a great segue as we wrap up to not only tomorrow, but next week. So we're really pleased to say we have Dave Kraus, who is the FAA's industry lead, as well as the CEO of Influential Drones, and Patricia Mathis from the FAA's FAST team. She's the manager of the FAST team. We are kicking off next week FAA's National Drone Safety Week, and they're going to join us on Clubhouse tomorrow. So we're going to be here running around the Mirage, grabbing people, but they're going to be the main speaker. So join us in Clubhouse, drop an audio chat tomorrow, which is 1 p.m. Eastern. And they will also be, both of them will be on this podcast next week, right smack dab in the middle of National Drone Safety Week. Also, teaser alert. Keep your eyes open for hypothetically, possibly a daily safety tip from me and Dave every single day next week. Check out DroneLife.com. Wonderful partner, Miriam McNabb and DroneLife. So thanks, everybody. It's a wrap. We're 2 over, but hope it was I know it was well worth it. Have a great one, and see you guys both on the expo floor here in a couple minutes.
Thank you, Don. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Dawn. Yep, and appreciate it.
All right.